Last summer, my friends and I decided to go on a camping trip in the remote mountains. We were all seasoned campers, so we thought we were prepared for anything. Little did we know, we were about to experience something straight out of a horror movie. We reached our campsite late in the afternoon. The place was stunning. Tall trees, a clear blue lake, and the sound of birds chirping. We set up our tents, gathered firewood, and by dusk, we had a roaring campfire going. The first night was perfect. We told stories, roasted marshmallows, and laughed until our stomachs hurt. As the night grew darker, we decided it was time to turn in. The forest around us was eerily quiet, with only the occasional rustle of leaves. I crawled into my tent, zipped it up, and settled into my sleeping bag. I remember thinking how peaceful it was. Around 2 a.m., I woke up suddenly. At first, I couldn't figure out why. My heart was racing, and I had this intense feeling of dread. I lay still, straining to hear any sound. That's when I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible scratching noise outside my tent. It was so subtle, I thought I might have imagined it. But then it came again, louder. I tried to convince myself it was just an animal, maybe a raccoon or a squirrel. But the scratching was too deliberate, too slow. I mustered the courage to peek out through a small opening in my tent. The moonlight was bright, casting long shadows across the campsite. That's when I saw it. A figure standing just at the edge of the tree line. Barely visible. It was tall, with unnaturally long limbs and a hunched posture. I couldn't make out any details, but I knew one thing. It wasn't one of my friends. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't notice me. But it did. The figure slowly turned its head in my direction. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I wanted to scream, but fear had paralyzed me. It started moving toward my tent, each step slow and deliberate. The scratching sound continued, and I realized now it wasn't on the tent. It was coming from the ground, like something sharp was being dragged across the earth. Just as it reached my tent, a loud crash rang out from the other side of the campsite. The figure froze. Its head snapped toward the noise. It stood there, torn between investigating the sound or continuing towards me. For what felt like an eternity, it didn't move. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it bolted into the forest. I lay there trembling, trying to process what had just happened. I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. My eyes stayed glued to the tent flap, listening for any sign of the creature's return. As soon as dawn broke, I woke up my friends and told them everything. At first, they thought I was messing with them, but when they saw the genuine fear in my eyes, they knew I wasn't joking. We packed up and left the campsite fast, not looking back. To this day, I have no idea what that figure was. Was it a person, an animal, or something else entirely? All I know is I'll never forget that night in the mountains. It was the most terrifying experience of my life, and it forever changed the way I look at camping. It was late October when I finally set out on a solo camping trip deep in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The autumn colors were in full blaze, amber, crimson, and rust carpeting the forest floor. I'd been craving isolation, silence. Out there, cell service vanishes, and the only voices are the trees and wind. The hike-in was quiet, but not in the peaceful way. The woods felt cautious, like it was watching me. I passed a twisted pine tree that looked almost burned. Its trunk was blackened, but there had been no wildfires recently. That was the first thing that felt off. By sunset, I reached a ridge clearing with a wide view of the valley below. It was beautiful in a haunting sort of way, the kind of view you admire in silence. I set up my tent, started a fire, and made a simple dinner. As the flames flickered, I heard it, a long, dragging sound in the woods behind me. I froze, listened. Nothing, just wind, but the silence after the sound was heavier than normal. I tried to sleep that night, but something kept scratching faintly at the back of my mind. A sound just out of range, a whisper I couldn't hear clearly. It felt like I was being thought about. Then, around 1 a.m., I heard a loud thud. Something heavy, just feet away from the tent. I snapped on my flashlight. Nothing. No breathing. No animal smell. Nothing. I stayed up the rest of the night with the flashlight in one hand and a hatchet in the other. In the morning, the forest looked normal again. Birds chirped. A squirrel darted across my path. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Just too many scary stories online. Still, I brought my knife when I went exploring. About a mile east of my camp, I found a narrow trail that looked unused, almost hidden. As I followed it, I noticed trees were marked, 5 claw-like gouges in the bark, always at eye level, always the same direction. The path ended at a crumbling hunting shack, half swallowed by moss and dirt. Its door was hanging off one hinge. Inside, it smelled like rot and old fire. Dust clung to every surface. There were bones in the corner. Not human, but picked clean. On one wall, etched in ash, were the words, "The hollow-eyed see all." Underneath that, someone had carved a date. It was more than 30 years ago. I stepped back, suddenly aware of how quiet it was. No birds, no breeze, just a low, almost imperceptible ringing in my ears. I returned to camp as quickly as I could, but the whole way back, I felt it, like eyes brushing my skin. At one point, I looked back and swore I saw a figure far behind me, standing still in the path, blending with the trees. That night, I built the biggest fire I could manage. I didn't even try to sleep. And just past midnight, it appeared again. Tall, gaunt, limbs too long. It stepped into the edge of the firelight, but never crossed into the circle. Its face was featureless, except for hollow eye sockets, glowing faint blue, like coals that hadn't gone out. It didn't breathe. It didn't move. And then it pointed. My limbs went numb. My vision darkened. I heard something, like static and whispering layered together. It wasn't speaking. It was entering, pushing into my head like cold fingers. I dropped to my knees, and when I looked up, it was gone. But the woods were still silent. The fire felt weaker. My body shook from the inside out. I knew I wouldn't survive another night. At dawn, I didn't pack. I just left, grabbed what I could carry, and left the rest. Halfway down the mountain trail, I passed the burned pine tree again. This time, it wasn't burned. It was black because something had scorched a massive, hand-shaped imprint across its bark. The claw marks were fresh. I don't know what I saw. No one believes me. Some say it was a spirit. Others think it was sleep deprivation. But deep in those mountains, there's something that watches. And if it points at you, you're already marked. Solo camping always gave me peace. Until the night, something started scratching the outside of my tent. I was completely alone, or at least I thought I was. I've always been the kind of person who finds peace in the wilderness. Give me a tent, a campfire, and the sound of rustling leaves, and I'm in my happy place. But after what happened last September, I'm not sure I'll ever camp alone again. It started as a solo weekend trip, something I'd done dozens of times before. A friend told me about a secluded camping spot deep in the woods, far from any town or hiking trail. According to him, it was quiet, untouched, and beautiful. Exactly what I wanted. I left early on a Friday and drove most of the day. By the time I parked at the trailhead and hiked the last 2 miles into the woods, the sun was already starting to dip below the treetops. The air smelled fresh, piney. The campsite itself sat in a small clearing surrounded by dense trees. I pitched my tent quickly and got a fire going as the sky turned orange, then purple. There wasn't a single sound apart from the breeze through the leaves and the occasional call of an owl. It felt perfect. After dinner, I leaned back in my camp chair, staring up at the stars. The silence was deep, almost too deep. And then, I got that weird feeling, like someone was watching me. At first, I tried to laugh it off, just my imagination getting the better of me. But it didn't go away. The back of my neck prickled, and my eyes kept darting into the trees, expecting something. But there was nothing, just the woods. Eventually, I put out the fire and crawled into my tent. The inside of it felt small, but safe. I zipped myself into my sleeping bag, trying to push away the unease. I was almost asleep when I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching through the leaves, circling my tent. My body went stiff. I held my breath. I told myself it had to be a deer, or maybe a raccoon. But deer don't walk like that. The footsteps stopped. Then came the sound I'll never forget. A faint scratching, like fingernails dragging across the nylon wall of my tent. I fumbled for my flashlight and flicked it on, shining it at the thin walls. The scratching stopped instantly, but there were no shadows, no silhouettes, just silence. Minutes passed. I stayed frozen, listening. Eventually, the footsteps resumed, moving away this time, crunching back into the forest. I stayed awake until the first light of morning bled through the fabric of the tent. When I finally stepped outside, my heart dropped. There were no footprints, but the ground around my tent was disturbed. The leaves had been swept aside in a perfect circle, like someone had been pacing. I didn't even bother with breakfast. I packed my gear and hiked out faster than I've ever hiked in my life. And even then, I swear, I could feel someone watching me from just beyond the trees. I don't know who or what was out there, but I know one thing. I'm never camping alone again.